2020 COVID-19 times, Cancer Book Club. And today I'm so thrilled to have with us Reverend David Maginley, whose book we'll be talking about today, Beyond Surviving, Cancer and Your Spiritual Journey. So we have yet to review a book that has a spiritual angle or content to it. So I'm really thrilled to do this interview today. David, I'm wondering if you could just introduce yourself to the audience here and tell them about your role. What is your role at the QE2, which is the major cancer health center in our province, our mutual province of Nova Scotia?
Well, certainly, and thank you for having me on for the interview, and hello to all the viewers, and really all the best for your cancer journey. I'm a 4-time cancer survivor. I've had a very rare form of cancer, a tumor that is 90% of the time benign, called a paraganglioma, and that led me down a road since I was 17 years old of discovery and exploration on the nature of spirit and life, and I actually went to university to study the meaning of life because of the cancer. And that took a meandering path that brought me to become ordained in the Lutheran Church, and then had a church for 10 years, and then moved to the health authority and became a hospital chaplain. So while I'm a Lutheran pastor, I'm an interfaith spiritual counselor for the cancer and palliative and intensive care program at the QE2 Health Sciences Center here. So my job fundamentally is to help people cope. It's not to get God into them, because God is everywhere. You don't need to get it into somebody. It's help them connect to the inner wisdom and strength and wrestle with the mortality, and not only go through cancer. I want to help them grow through cancer. Use cancer to amplify life and deepen your humanity, and even awaken to your immortal nature and that spiritual dimension of the human experience. So that's my job.
What a job. I might also add, David has played a role in my life in that he's mentored and been a pastor to many of my friends who have died. He's buried them and been at their memorial services and so on. So I have this other feeling about. I have seen you up at the podium in a church, celebrating the lives of people I really loved. So I'm really, really, really delighted to have this chance to showcase you and your work today.
Thank you.
So what I'd like to do, I'd just like to talk a little bit about my experience of the book, and I know Pat has things she wants to share, but I want to share with the audience that this book, Beyond Surviving, I have read this book 3 times. The first time I was so moved by the content, it was hard to process because I had so much emotion. It was all very valuable emotion to feel, but a lot of empathy for the cases that are described, as well as just remarkable admiration for the survivors described. And the second time I read it, I was able to sort of imbibe the messages more peacefully and sort of take in the overall landscape of what you were sharing about spirituality and cancer. And the third time was much more interpersonally meaningful to me because I had just recently been diagnosed with a probably terminal diagnosis. So for me, the content around facing mortality and coming to terms with the end, was something I need to do. And this book has really, really given me and really, I have to say, it's the only thing that has given me a great sense of peace going forward from that diagnosis. In a way, I was not anticipating being this okay with it, but I am okay because I've read your book. So I want to say that I want to emphasize the personal impact, the deeply personal impact this book has had on me.
Oh my! Well, that is exactly the hope that I wanted to impart, and to certainly provide material that will help people survive and cope well with cancer, but also to die with eyes open, heart connected, and hope restored. Not hope in some future that cannot be, but hope found in the quality of presence in this moment, to awaken to a mystery that holds you, and that is love. But throughout the book, I speak of love not as an emotion, but as the highest state of consciousness.
Mhm.
Do you
And
think
that's why it's said in many traditions that God is love. So love is much bigger than we ever comprehend, and it's fascinating and intriguing to realize we emanate from it, and we're going to return to it when we
Mhm.
die.
one of the things, there are many wonderful things about this book. I loved it. Do you think you could have written this book had you not been through your own cancer experience?
Oh no, my cancer was my training more than any formal education I've ever had. And that training continues with every patient I see. They teach me and remind me of the ultimate lessons of life and of humanity. It was profoundly difficult to write, and yet it seemed to flow through me. Uh, I'm very grateful now for my cancer and all that it continues to teach me. Um, it is it. I it's funny. I don't know how to put it into words. Well, I wrote the book. Apparently, I do. But yeah, it's
One of the things I love about your book is there's no black or white. They're just shades of gray in so much of this. And I think that's very, very real. You talk about, you often use two totally 180-degree away terms, hot, cold, life, death, whatever you might like, however you might like to phrase it, to really underscore, I guess, the power of these experiences. The Now I'm going to search for words. I guess let me form it in terms of a question, perhaps. Um, oh boy, Robin, I'm going to let you jump in because I'm getting lost. I'm getting a little
Okay,
lost in
you
this for
go,
the moment.
you
Yeah.
go on that one. One of the things, I was present when David launched his book. He had a launch at the health center, and the room was completely packed to the rafters with folks. And I remember you talking, David, in your speech that day about what led you to write the book, and I wonder if you could share that.
sure. Well, first, let me just touch on this and that binary style. I found as I was writing, I was presenting like hope and despair, grief and love, uh, as a way to invite people to a dance of the human experience, not to arrive at one or the other as a goal, but to work with the movement between the two extremes, life and death, um, survival or not, and to end up resting with the ambiguity, the unknown future, or to stay with the movement of consciousness as it negotiates with suffering and mortality. That seemed to give the text life and made the sentences flow much smoother. Those sentences erupted from me at 4 o'clock in the morning after a profoundly difficult case in which a young man, Josh, 14 years old, the youngest patient we'd ever treated, he had died. Caring for him was such a privilege and one of the most heartbreaking experiences in my 20-year career. And, when you're exposed to so much suffering and you're immersed in it, it's going to build emotional cholesterol in you.
Hmm.
And that's got to clear out somehow. Usually it comes through compassion fatigue and stress, and then nightmares and gastric issues and grumpiness. And I've experienced all of those. But this case, it woke me at 4 in the morning, and I was pulled to the computer by that material. And I sat and I poured the story out. And then I just kept waking at 4 a.m. and going to the computer and writing. And 2 years later, the book emerged. I knew It was in me because I had been procrastinating about writing for 10 years, and I couldn't hold it in any longer. So it was as much a form of therapy for myself as it was to write a book to help other people.
I seem to remember you saying that in some sense you had felt, for the language, I guess, called to write the book, and that it was something you had known you were meant to do, and that was why you had survived the 4 times. This was a piece of work that was you needed to complete.
Yes, I've experienced inspiration during writing before, and what does it feel like? Well, it feels like you're in the groove. It feels right. You finish a sentence and you just know, yes, that's it. And whenever we have a creative project and a creative expression, when it's accurate to our experience, when it's a perfect mirror of our deepest self, then we go, yes, that's it. And so, is it my higher self, my deeper self? Is it God and spirit? Yes, it's all that.
Mm.
And it just flowed beautifully. Now, that doesn't mean it always did that. I wrestled those pages to the ground sometimes and had blocks, and then had a period of about a year of revision where I had to throw out 3 chapters that I loved and compress them into footnotes. But it's better for it, and I'm very grateful. Thank you to the reviewers who told me when things worked and when things didn't. And that
It's
was
always
wonderful guidance.
it's sort of a weird thing when you talk about the depth, like emotional depth we go into in writing about our cancer or cancer generally. And then when it's time to revise that book, suddenly it's like, okay, how many G's are there in anguish? Oh wait, is there 2 T's in vomiting? Like, so you have to have these sort of superficial editorial decision making and review, and have a more distant eye on work that was so emotional to produce in the first place.
Well,
So I know, having written the Cancer Olympics, that is an interesting phase, the editorial phase.
I'm very grateful to my editor, Paula Sarson, who is local here in Nova Scotia, and again to my reviewers, and they helped me shape and massage the pages into what is now so much better than I ever imagined I could produce. I've been a mediocre student all my life. I never imagined that I'd be writing a book, let alone an award-winning book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things you talk about in your book that I think is a great thread through the whole thing is interconnectedness. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, nothing is insignificant. Everything is connected. Now, that is in reference to not only why did I get cancer? Well, there are so many factors at play in it. I want to identify the complexity of that. We continue to treat cancer very much as a biological phenomenon, ignoring the blatant reality that mind and body and spirit are intimately connected. Over half of cancers are preventable, a cause of lifestyle and environment. And I think it is critical to fess up to the mess that we've made in this world and the mess that we tend to make of our lives at one point or another, because we're all here for the human experiment. And that's going to influence biology. And I did want to dive into that ultimate mystery. What is the connection between thought and my body? Can I influence my cancer? Can I influence my healing? Yes, you can. And it's much more complicated than you think. But you are not powerless in that project.
I agree with you totally, yeah.
And then looking at the entire mosaic of what is reality, what is consciousness, I delve into that ultimate question. And I'm so grateful for the researchers and all of the people who've taught me. I was able to go down so many avenues that a clergyman rarely speaks of. I wanted to present a spirituality that is intelligent and respectful of our modern age and our sense of place in the universe, not relying on the old doctrines or the old language, but to raise the bar, and I'm very proud of that.
And that's what I want to emphasize is quite refreshing about this book, because many people avoid spiritual books on cancer for fear that they will be hit with hard dogma from whatever sect or religion the person is from, or that there's you must do this or you're going to hell kind of vibe in the book. What I found so liberating about your book is I think anyone from any religious background could read this and benefit from it, because it isn't straight up Christian or straight up Old Testament or straight up whatever it is. This is a spiritual journey, including one's sense of oneness with nature or sense of connected with others. These kinds of things that are spiritual, but not necessarily rooted in dogma. So I wanted to reassure any potential readers that they're, my atheistic readers like my husband are like, no, I'm not going to read a thing that has anything to do with God. There's no way I'm going to. So something like this, he could read this. He could benefit.
Yeah. So one of the, I thought it would sound radical, and everyone just told me, well, that makes perfect sense. Is that if God is love, then your spirituality is not determined by the content of your belief system. It's really determined by the quality of your love. And every healthy spiritual tradition emphasizes this. How do you love? How do you love yourself, each other, this world, this life? And in my own Christian tradition, that's where the rubber hits the road. Jesus didn't dive into doctrine. The church sure does. But he was always looking at, how do you love? How do you treat your neighbor? God is love. And so I think that's part of a second reformation that's needed within the Christian church, because it sure breaks down all the walls between the denominations.
Yes.
If you see cancer as a disconnect of love, the other side of that is it's a portal to reclaim it.
Oh, thank you. Yes. It is something that calls us to do the homework of the heart and soul, right? It awakens us to what is critical. It realigns our priorities. We reinvest our energy. And inevitably, I find with the thousands now of patients who I've supported, it brings us back to what I call the unfinished love stories. How have I loved well? How have I been well loved? What are the broken bits that I need to address? Cancer amplifies all of this, so let's get down to work. That's the homework of the heart, and it will reflect in the body.
Well, and cancer compresses our perspective of what our life is, and it raises that ultimate uncertainty. And I think that compression of perceived time forces us to really dive into these issues, which we'd otherwise totally avoid.
Yes, the decades have flown by. And yet the hour before me as I lie in bed on chemotherapy lasts forever. So there's this strange new relationship to time and a new attention to the moment. And there's another irony I find. We take cancer treatment to fight for more moments of life, but we avoid the moment we're in because we're distracted, because it's hard. And the spiritual assignment is not to get you to believe in God, right? It's to show up in this moment. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, you can discover that you are held by a presence in that moment. Now, you can call that the higher self, or just the deeper dimension of being, or ultimate reality, or source, whatever term, doesn't matter.
And that moment can be timeless.
Yes. Right? So try some mindfulness, 20 seconds. Just try it regularly for 20 seconds.
I have to ask you, I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you meditate? Do you have a regular meditation practice?
I have a consistently sporadic meditation practice.
No, one of the reasons I ask is certainly I think meditation has been a game changer for me. You talk about, once you reach that point where you watch your thoughts, oh my God, it can be a horror film, it can be a comedy, but it's a totally different perspective on what are you doing to yourself.
Yeah, what a surprise to discover I don't need to believe everything I think. I don't need to be controlled by everything I feel. I can watch my experience. I can step back from all the mess of what it is with no agenda to understand it or analyze it. I'm just going to observe the noise that is me. And when we do that, it's possible to discover there's something underneath all that noise that's stable and settled. Maybe I can only touch on it for a few seconds, but it's in there. And I don't need to learn how to manifest it. I just need to uncover it and settle down into it.
Well,
It's a spiritual practice, because if all of reality arises from consciousness, which is something I explore in the book, and primary consciousness is another word for God. If all of reality emanates and is sustained by consciousness, then my consciousness is the only real estate I share with the divine or the spirit. Well, then that's what I need to work with. How am I present? It's new material in this distracted society.
I always find a lot of wisdom in some of the Buddhist sayings. They're among my favorites. And I think the comments on attachment as being the source of all pain really apply to our thoughts and our perception of our world.
Yes, I pull quite a bit from the Buddhist tradition, and I touch upon the Hindu and the Muslim and Judaism and the wisdom that comes from these traditions. But in Buddhism, that is, I think, the spiritual tradition with the most in-depth spiritual psychology. And it's fascinating, the parallels between something like in Tonglen, a Buddhist practice in which you work with suffering by drawing in the suffering of others, connecting it, joining it to yours, and then breathing back compassion and love for those people. Well, that has a parallel in the Christian church called redemptive suffering, in which we draw in the suffering of others, offer it up to the Christ, and then pull in that light and then send it out.
I think that there are so many parallels between all the great religions, and that leads to spirituality versus religion. And I love the way your book explores and touches upon so many of these parallels, because I think it's I think these concepts are just so much greater than any one sect.
Yes, but they have been poorly explained and presented in, I feel within my own Christian tradition. They continue to be framed within theological concepts and dogma and doctrines that come from centuries past. And there must be a modern presentation of this congruent with our understanding of our place in the universe and our nature of reality. The insights that most excite me come not from faith traditions, but from quantum physics and astrophysics, which show that we live in a universe in which only 0.004% of reality is made up of what we can see. So if you are moving through life saying what you see is what you get, you're only getting 0.004% of it. 4% of all of reality is all the atoms in the universe. Then 73% is made up of something called dark matter, which has only been observed through inference on its effect on galactic clusters. And then, that's 24% is dark matter, and then like 74% of the universe is dark energy, which is just complete mystery. That excites me. That leaves so much room for spirit. We don't need to put handles on that and define it. I think we need to be open to the mystery of it and realize we emanate from it. Cancer can amplify that awareness and homework because it makes you ask, who am I? Will I continue? Do I matter? How do I fight for this life? And what is this life I'm fighting for? Interesting stuff.
What I found rewarding about the book, it was sort of the arc of that. So the arc of talking about people who fought and who looked like they were on absolutely doomed to survive anyway, bone marrow transplants and things that are last ditch things that miraculously worked. And then other people for whom that you don't just, let's just talk about the wonderful survivors. You say, no, this person went through that same treatment and it failed, but they surrendered to the inevitable, and actually kind of in some sense would be able to talk to you about how much they look forward to the release of death, and how they wanted their loved ones to be okay.
Yeah, death is not a failure, right? Death is actually,
we're all
going to die. We're all going to find out if what I said is right. Right? We're all going to find out what's on the other side. And I am convinced that it is pure wonder. And I say that confidently because I had a peek at it, right? I'm one of those people who had a near-death experience.
Share that with us, please.
Yeah, 1988, second round with cancer. My tumors are a Molotov cocktail. They don't kill you because they spread and take over your body. They kill you because they blow up and release these, dopamine and epinephrine, and you have a massive heart attack, or it just blows your veins to bits. You die in about a minute, maybe 30 seconds. It's preceded by painful cramps, dizziness, feels like a panic attack, and then boom, out you go. Well, that happened to me many times, and I survived all of them, obviously. But this one in 88 knocked me unconscious, and I suddenly found myself in a different dimension, a different realm, which sounds, as I'm about to describe it, ridiculously simple. I was on a grassy hill, and there was a tree at the top of the hill, and there was light coming from everything and everywhere. That's why the tree's on the cover. That photograph is taken by my good friend Freeman Patterson, who's a well-known Canadian photographer. And I'm so grateful to him because it captures that feeling. I wanted to run to that tree, but I couldn't because there was a person, a masculine figure there. He felt like my best friend. And we had a conversation in which he basically told me, "You're doing great. Your job's not done. You got a lot to learn. You got a lot to do. You're going to go back. We will be with you. Don't worry about it. We'll see you later." I did not want to come back. And when I woke back in this reality, I was so depressed and sad. I have been homesick for what I experienced there ever since. Being one with love, one with light, one with everything, and yet still being an individual and having this sort of body and being infused with the joy, awareness, congruency, and authenticity beyond anything I've ever experienced here. That was my near-death experience.
What I've heard others with life after life experiences like that, they'll say is that they do not fear death at all after that. Having gone through that, they go, it is not to be feared. It is.
Yeah.
When it comes, it'll be.
I am not afraid to die at all. And I have spoken with hundreds and hundreds of people who've had these experiences. 1 in 10 who have a brush with death will have a near-death experience. In fact, there's an organization called the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I've spoken at their conferences many times. Like 400 people get together who've had a peek at the other side and they come back.
Imagine being in a room like that, eh?
Well, it's fascinating because great presenters and researchers and people who share their experiences, but then you go to the experiencer room where we sit in a circle and we share. Well, it's only about 10 minutes in, 5 minutes, and we're all just sitting there weeping because we're homesick for what we saw. Oh, I feel
That's amazing.
I feel it right now.
Anita Moorjani wrote a wonderful book about her near-death experience, and I love the way she describes our perception or our lack of perception. And she uses the analogy, she says, imagine you're in this huge dark warehouse. It's immense. And you can't see anything. It's pitch black. And you have a flashlight, and you can shine it around, and that's all you can see. That's all your reality is. And she points out that's how little we see in our daily lives.
Right? 0.004% of reality.
Exactly.
Is what we perceive. So it is so exciting it is so exciting to have quantum physics, astrophysics, and metaphysics support the ultimate hope that the spiritual traditions speak of, which our world is aching for, but which many have rejected and walked away from because it did not respect their intelligence. It did not speak to the depth and the pain and the struggle of their experience. Now, I'm still an ordained minister in a faith I deeply love. Right? There's so much richness in the Christian tradition and in all spiritual traditions, but never before in the history of humanity have we had a paradigm, material reductionism, that completely rejects spirit. Now, that is a result of the scientific method, which is not actually limited to materialism. The majority of scientists are very open to these mysteries. And the ultimate scientific question is, what the heck is consciousness?
Yeah.
So I think it's an exciting age in which we are seeing spirituality and science merge and dance beautifully. I'm very optimistic about what is to come, and I wanted to write a book that contributed to that.
This may be a question you've been asked of late, I believe, by media and others, but in your view, now that the entire world shares what we as cancer survivors have undergone, that imminent, is super duper risk and it could happen anytime and so on. With the whole COVID-19, now everyone knows what that kind of mortality is like. Everybody now understands kind of the isolation that cancer patients often have to undergo, staying away from toxins and infectious people and so on. In your view, would you say that there has been a greater attention to the spirituality surrounding death because of the degree of death that we're all confronted with, all of us, not just we with cancer?
You know, Robin, that's a great point. Now the whole world is familiar with the existential anxiety that cancer patients experience from the moment of diagnosis.
Right. Suddenly,
Suddenly life is fragile. Suddenly you're wondering, where's the next hit going to come from? You're aware of your mortality. This is good. This is something that we in Western society run from, while other traditions they have it right in front of them all the time, other cultures. So what are you going to do with the anxiety? What does it do to you? It realigns priorities. It asks, invites, and sometimes drags you to wake up, to be present, to appreciate, to invest your time and energy wisely, and to realize there are simple things you can do to protect yourself. Now, with COVID, those simple things are wash your hands, maintain social distancing, right? Cover your mouth. If certainly if you have a cough, that the masks are really to protect other people from you, right? And listen to your body. Now, cancer does the same thing. It asks you to pay attention to what you're eating and what you're thinking and what you're exposed to. How can you best love and care for yourself, and as a result, love and care for others? It amplifies life. It can be used to grow into a healthier tomorrow. I certainly hope the pandemic results in that. It's going to be a long journey.
I found, though, the experience of COVID-19 versus cancer to be very different. I found cancer sent me on a very internal journey. And I find COVID to be a more external and hopefully temporary set of circumstances.
Great point.
Well, COVID is shared, right? Whereas cancer is not.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. So everybody's comparing these, and I don't see the comparison. I have two totally different experiences between the two.
Interesting. When I speak with cancer patients, especially at the first weeks of the pandemic, they were saying now the world knows a bit of what I've been feeling for since diagnosis.
But
they
it's
were
risk
making
versus
connections.
reality. Cancer's
Yeah,
reality. COVID is risk.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah.
But a super serious risk, right? So on Twitter,
Well,
you can see someone saying, "This is a picture of my mother. She stayed home the entire lockdown. She went to Tesco's once. She's dead. She died 2 weeks after 2 weeks after her trip to the Tesco's. She
and what
won trip once. This, you know, and you read a story like that, and you think this is lethal, and it can come at people from anywhere.
the thing I find interesting is what different experiences, like I'm in the US, different parts of our country have had with this. All the states have managed it differently. They've had different rates of infection. Obviously, New York's been very hard hit. The CDC just came out with an overall fatality rate of 0.26% for COVID-19. Now, obviously, there are much higher chances of death in different groups. Older people, men.
Well,
Certainly, New York has had a much, people with cancer, New York's had a much more intense experience than other parts of the world. And it'll be interesting to see how those different experiences and our evolving knowledge impact how we view this.
Yeah, there's huge concern, of course. This is a brand new virus that we don't know much about, and the long-term effects in the
Yeah,
survivors are still being discovered. Its mortality rate is much higher than the flu, and it's so contagious, right? It can spread so quickly. So yeah, it's not as serious as cancer. It certainly is more serious in that it you can infect other people and it can happen so
yes.
rapidly. So both
yeah,
of them are going to
my
amplify your
my
mortality.
sort of bleak jokes that I sometimes make is that a COVID-19 death would actually be more humane than the death that I am anticipated to have. Um, but I don't want to die that way because I don't want to put anyone else at risk, because that's what it would mean. It would mean be having to be in a hospital and with healthcare providers and maybe in jeopardizing them and so on. So, you know, it's in some ways I envy them, and because it's at least quick, but in another way, I would never want to leave my life having jeopardized someone else's life.
As a society, I think we need guidance to make spiritual sense of an experience like COVID-19. How can it be that portal to greater spirituality? What advice would you give people?
Oh, well, there's a line I quote from a doctor: "Don't waste the crisis." Uh, so, how can you use this pandemic to address the essential issues of your life? You know, to reconsider where you're putting your energy, and to walk mindfully, a little more mindfully through your day. Right. Fundamentally, the biggest spiritual lesson is learning how to work with anxiety. Uh, to realize, okay, protecting myself is easy. Protecting others is easy. I just have to be consistent with it. But what do I do with my fear? Because I can't seem to make it go away. Well, the fear is very wise. It's saying something very important. So work mindfully with it. Use reframing so you can realize, where am I catastrophizing and where is it realistic? How does my body hold the anxiety, right? Is it in my gut? Is it in my heart, my chest, my neck, my temples, my migraines, headaches, shoulder pain? How's it affecting my behavior? Tune into all of those signals. Practice mindful, compassionate presence. Realize that the world is, and you are safer than you realize. Maybe I'll turn off the news and all that negative energy and just move more intentionally through my days. I think, of course, it's a good opportunity to pray, to pray for others, pray for the world, right? And when I say prayer, I really encourage you, not prayer as petitioning to an external God, but prayer as participation in the consciousness of God. So whether you do that through, the Christian or the Buddhist or the Islamic tradition, whatever, be an instrument of that light and love and compassion by participating in it.
I hope COVID-19 brings together a sense of community in terms of the shared experience. You know, the community of, I want to be careful, I don't want to infect somebody else. The community realization that some people have been deeply impacted, some people have lost, you know, significant numbers of loved ones or friends. I think that that community thread coming out of this could be very meaningful.
Yes, spirituality is never an individual practice. Never. It is always a community practice because it is grounded not in your enlightenment or your peace of mind, but in the well-being of the entire world. There's a saying, Teilhard de Chardin said, as long as one person suffers, Christ remains crucified. Right? Your spirituality is working with the raw material of your consciousness, and because we all emanate and arise from consciousness, then we're all part of this network, this spiritual network. What I do to you, what do I do to the least of these? I do to the divine. What I do to you, I do to me, because we are one. And spiritual practice must always build community, not just individual well-being.
And that building community is a challenge, especially for the person affected by cancer today, because you can't go out in the community.
Yeah, thank goodness for Zoom, eh? And for this sort of technology.
As I am, so it's sort of like, I got to stay home completely. Yeah. How do I foster community? How do I foster those what you're describing? Social media, and through avenues like this. So fortunately, modern technology gives us a way to sort of reach out beyond just being in our own homes. Yeah. But you know, I've often reflected that. I think about all those folks who lived in monasteries in the Middle Ages and how they had their own personal practice to try and but also lived in a community, and yet at the same time had to kind of move through some of these individual.
The pandemic has resulted in a burst of material on spirituality and the wisdom of isolation and using the pandemic for spiritual growth and awakening. To be honest, I'm bumbling along with all that stuff. I'm trying to figure out how to build and maintain community. I'm one of the very fortunate who can still go to work, and I care for my patients and enjoy a fairly normal day. But always aware of social distancing. Always have a mask in my pocket and wear them in the hospital and grocery store, things like that. Your spiritual path, when done well, will drive you into the struggle, the shadow aspects. It will awaken and expose that raw, unfinished, difficult material within your soul. It's not about peace of mind, right? That's a byproduct. It's about being authentic. It's about being real. And to be honest, I am really a mess sometimes, right? I am a mystery. I am human. So your compassionate practice in that is your spiritual homework, not to be cool and calm and collected, but to be authentic, real, and fully alive.
And I really love that message in the book about that, because as we've discussed many times, cancer patients often get the pressure to be positive and to have and not allow yourself to have bleak thoughts about the end and so on. And yet, but there's a point at which you do kind of have to start that kind of thought and planning and so on.
And you're doing that sometimes more for the benefit of your family. You want to protect them from, the possibility of suffering and dying, and you want to be strong for them, as well as you're being strong for yourself. But eventually, it's about being real.
It's about being real, and that's the authenticity part I thought was great. So it's sort of a message that I, at least the psychologist in my day job for a lot of cancer patients, to say, just feel the feelings, don't fight them. Trying to be relentlessly positive every single second of every single day, it's not possible. It is a superhuman task, far too much to take on your shoulders. If you need to have some despair some days, feel it. Just let yourself have it. You'll come out of it. Don't stay there, but you'll go in, you can wallow for, Chris Carr in her book, Sexy Crazy Cancer, says you're allowed to wallow in despair for 3 days. And then you have to kind of pony up and move along. But, if you're going to feel despair, feel it. Because if you try to suppress it, you're just asking for.
I remember a time when I was really trying to keep it cool and calm, and I was like, I got this. I'm fine. I'm fine. Which means flustered, insecure, neurotic, and emotional, FINE, right? And then it all crashed, and I found myself curled up in a fetal position on my bed, bawling and soaking the sheets with my tears and just wailing. And exhausted afterwards, I dragged my sorry self to the bathroom and splashed water on my face and just went into the evening watching a movie and back to bed. And I was like that for a few days. Well, that was clearing out emotional cholesterol. That was really good processing. That was important and miserable work.
Yes.
You need to do.
It's a requirement.
I think you need to do that, but to go back to the NDE, and I've had not an NDE, but some very similar, very deep spiritual experiences where I just know. And I kind of see death as an adventure. I mean, I'm not looking to die, don't get me wrong. I want to complete doing what I'm doing, but I kind of see it as a new adventure. I know, and I've been through the despair, and I'll revisit that, don't get me wrong. But I don't know, I don't have this, I no longer have this deep-seated fear most of the time.
And let's remember, it's not dying that's the problem, it's leaving. It's leaving all the love that we've known. It's leaving the only reality we can recall that we've experienced.
Oh, but you get to have new realities.
Boy, do you ever. And they are beyond your ability to imagine. They are staggering. Every near-death experience is as unique as the individual having it. And yet all of them have universal qualities and marks. And across all cultures and all generations, these go back thousands of years. Yes. You know that you're dead, you leave your body, you're in a different dimension, you encounter other entities, angels or celestial beings, or most of the time, ancestors, your grandparents, or right? You experience it according to your cultural and spiritual tradition and language so that you can comprehend it. And you are given information and then you return. That's universal. So, and beyond that, well, we don't know.
I find it all fascinating. I just picked up Eben Alexander's second book, I believe.
Oh, yes.
I'm looking forward to reading that.
I read the first one. It was very compelling. But although I want to just comment that for many of us, it's not death that we fear, it's the suffering. It's the physical pain. And I've got 18 weeks of chemotherapy to go through at minimum and maybe more. And, I was on a protocol before that was just like, you wished you were dead. It was that horribly toxic. And Pat remembers me, my face bleeding, my mouth bleeding, my hair falling out, all that stuff. And, it's how to cope with suffering is a challenge for anyone from any spiritual tradition. What I like about my tradition, the Christian tradition, is that Christ suffered too, and it's sort of my God knows what suffering's about. Yeah. So that to me, that's why I respond to that religion, because I don't want a God that doesn't know what suffering is. I want a God who knows what it's like to have your face bleed. But that's a whole other topic. That's a whole other moving through fear of suffering and fear of pain and fear of side effects and all the other things that cancer.
But it is a good opportunity to encourage all of you viewers, don't shy away. You are the captain of the ship. It is your ship. And listen to your body and know when to say enough is enough.
Yeah.
And trust that your body can experience and endure more than you can imagine it can. I always encourage people, get palliative care on board early, and hopefully the philosophy of palliative care will move to that. Have the conversations, the hard ones, about death and dying with your family, such as, if I die from this, do I want to be at home or in the hospital? Do I want to be awake or unconscious? What do I want my level of pain control to be? Don't be a hero about pain. There's no need to suffer pain unnecessarily. It may mean you're loopy or unconscious, but I love the drugs when I had my cancer. Um, but I do want to note, while I've had cancer, I have not suffered like my patients have suffered. My cancer is not affected by chemotherapy and radiation. The only thing that works is surgery. I am one of the very few cases in the world where the cancer recurred, and 4 times at that. And if I die from my cancer, I die quickly. The cancer blows, I pass out, and I'm gone. So,
and yet the living anxiety of walking around with a ticking time bomb like that.
yeah, there is that. You know that through the court. For years, I walked around knowing that any moment, if I got excited.
Well, and
right?
that the part about the, how many times in life are you excited your child is born, something wonderful happens. Those are all aspects of excitement. Would you all, oh no, I can't let myself have this feeling. Like that would be
Yes.
To fear one's own emotions because they can bring about your sudden death.
Exactly. I could have experienced
psychologically. That would be
it. Could be joy or anxiety. Either one of them could kill me.
Yes. So you'd have to work really hard to stay calm all the time, and that would be depriving at some level.
Which is where meditation came in. And sometimes I did it through meditation. Other times I did it by shutting off my feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, anyone would do that.
Yeah.
That would be how. So anyway, all our situations are unique, and they all come with their own unique challenges. And as I've learned over the years, that each story has its own remarkable perils and poignancies that are unique to that individual, have to be respected.
So David, is there another book in the works?
Yes.
All right, tell us about it.
No. I can say a little bit. I don't want to say too much. I'm really wrestling with this one. I'm trying to write a book about the spiritual dimensions of medically assisted death.
Oh, really? How interesting.
That is so important. That is
so physician-assisted death is often what it's called in the States, or euthanasia is a term. It's called medical assistance in dying in Canada. And I feel there are a lot of foundational dimensions to that which are not being explored adequately by anyone, but things that I've witnessed. I have been present at several cases. I have been, kept abreast and involved in policies, and I've spoken with many people who were considering it, and the cases I've been present at, most of them went very smoothly and were marked by great beauty and dignity, yet something was not being addressed, and I'm trying to explore that.
I have a lot of reactivity to the whole MAID thing, and I can't wait to read your book on that. I can't wait to have a spiritual analysis of it, because it's so, there's a ton of values attached to that whole thought process and how things are. I have zero judgment over people who choose MAID for themselves. I completely compassionately understand, but it is not a choice I feel I could ever make myself.
Now, let's remember, I think it's only about 1.3 or 1.5% of people who die in Canada choose MAID.
Yeah.
It may go up as high as like 3 or 4%, which it is in Belgium and Netherlands. I'm not at this point coming down on one side or the other. I want to deepen the conversation.
It's so complex, and it's so individual, and I've had people I love very deeply who've made that was the choice they made for themselves, and yet when they've said, "Here, Robin, here's the MAID materials, you should sign up for this," I said, I just can't.
No, I think it's a very personal decision, and it has to be.
But in the thought of what is my values, I think a spiritual perspective would be essential for so many readers, so many people.
Yeah, I've been present with people who are very spiritual, who felt very close to God as they died by MAID, were very curious and excited about what they were headed towards.
Mhm.
And yet, even in those cases, something was being missed, and I'm trying to figure that out as much as help others figure it out. So I'm wrestling with the material. It's very complex. I think it is one of the most significant issues in healthcare today,
Yes, absolutely.
and speaks to the um, ultimate perspective our culture has on death and the direction that our culture is headed in. It is part of a spectrum, a continuum of the philosophy around medical care, suffering, agency, what an individual is, and what is the most compassionate response. And it profoundly impacts on the nature of palliative care, resources, and funding. It's huge.
Huge.
I hope I can honor it.
Well,
That'll be a
and we'll have to read it. That's
that'll
like-
be a wonderful book. This has been a wonderful conversation today. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Robin, do you want to hold up that book again, because this is really a must-read for absolutely everybody.
Beyond Surviving.
Right.
Cancer and Your Spiritual Journey.
So you can pick that up.
Reverend
Please
David.
support your local bookseller. They can order it, but you can get it off Amazon, and it's available in paperback, electronic version for Kindle, and Apple and Kobo and all that. And you can get the audiobook, which is
Signed copy. So
the audiobook is my voice. I
yes,
keep
I have it on audio as well. So it's there's no this is, no one should miss this book. Not of all the books that we've reviewed, and I don't know how many have we done now, Pat. 30, 40.
I was looking at the page on the website the other day. I can't believe in the last several years how, between Cancer Book Club and All Things Cancer, how many people I've interviewed. It's astonishing.
Yes, no, this is definitely this is, in my view, this is the best book of all of the books that we've reviewed.
There's
thank you.
It's right up there.
For the Cancer Olympics, my book, which is awesome.
Which we have to do. Thank you. My COVID sign off. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yes.
And be well, everybody.
Thank you.